Real quick before we get into the podcast, I want to go through the reviews that we got this week. Like I said, guys, if you want me to read your review on the show, all you've got to do, go to Apple Podcasts, scroll down to the bottom of the page, and leave a review. Let me know what you think about the show. We've got two this week to read. So first one comes from Ty Puzzle, says, a helpful source for serious basketball players. Hey, Ethan, I've been following this podcast for a good while now, but I wanted to thank you for your helpful information. I have goals in basketball, and these podcasts help these podcasts you make help me in a big way. Thank you again for helping me so much. Keep it up. Appreciate that, Ty Puzzle. And then our second one comes from Emmett. Shout out to my guy, Emmett. I see Emmett commenting on my videos all the time. And he says, love it. I began listening to this podcast around June 2020. Let me say that they've been marvelous. The podcast can teach you so much about the game on the physical and mental sides. Coach Ethan covers a wide variety of topics in basketball, so you can learn something new every week in the podcast drops. Want to learn about how to be a leader on your team? Check the podcast. Want to learn about how to train during the season? Check the podcast. Want to learn about the mindsets for basketball? Check the podcast. Thank you, Coach Ethan, for everything you do and continue to do for the basketball community. # Vision Your Basketball Family. Again, shout out to Emmett, my guy. Appreciate the review. Like I said, guys, you want to be featured as well. Go to Apple Podcasts, scroll on the bottom of the page, leave a review. Let me know what you think about the show, and I'll read it on the show. Let's get into the podcast. Welcome to the Vision Driven Basketball Training Podcast. Appreciate all of you guys for tuning in today. Everybody who's listening on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen to your podcast. And of course, everybody who's watching on YouTube, make sure you guys, if you're new, subscribe, drop a like as well. Very special episode today. Got my guy, Danny Cooper here from Danny Cooper Basketball. And I've known Danny for about a little over a year now. And he's really been doing some good things when it comes to training. And he's got a real unique perspective being a player and a trainer as well. And I think that's going to be really valuable for you guys to hear about. And I'm excited to be able to get some of his takes, his input on training in general. And I think there's a lot of cool things that we're going to be able to cover today. So like I kind of mentioned already, Danny's got a unique perspective being a college basketball player and a skills trainer. So I'll let him kind of give you guys an intro on who he is and kind of how he got his start in training, where he's at now. And Danny, welcome to the show.
Sure, man. Thanks for having me on. So yeah, I could start all the way back in high school. So I played for Plymouth Whitemarsh High School, a pretty storied program. And I was a key contributor on a team that was ranked 19th in the country. So that was really cool. And then simultaneously, I'd say junior year, I started getting into training because there were a bunch of kids around the area who I knew. So I really enjoyed, teaching the game. I always have kind of been like a coach on the floor because I've been a point guard. So that's kind of how I got into training. And then I was kind of your typical like undersized guy. So I had like all the Division III offers. But I was always like kind of headstrong where I was D1 or bust. So I ended up choosing Penn State, and that's actually where we met. So fast forward a couple years, I tried out for Penn State and didn't go well. So I decided I wanted to play, and I ended up at Moravian College, and that's kind of where I'm at today, to make a long story short.
Yeah, no, and that's also why, because I kind of want to get into your journey to Moravian, because I think it's so interesting. So a couple of things that you mentioned right there, I'll kind of jump around, but so you said you tried out for the Penn State team. What was that process like? Because actually it's funny, I get DMs about that. People telling me like, oh, I want to try out for a D1 team. Like, coach, would I be able to walk on to a D1 team? And I think a lot of times, and this is kind of a thing in general, I don't think players understand like what that level of especially you talk about like high major, like Big Ten basketball. I don't think people quite understand what exactly they're saying when they say that. So give us a little insight into what that was like.
Yeah, so I mean, I say the number one thing for sure, obviously, is athleticism and just strength in general. So the tryout actually was against other potential walk-ons, not the players. So that obviously was my kind of caliber of player. And it actually went really well, but I guess it's tough year to year when they decide if they're going to take anybody, because they don't really need any of us, to be honest, like, because you kind of be on the end of the bench. So if they already have their roster, it's kind of, they're not going to take you. So that was tough. I mean, I really just, I took the approach of, it's going to be a good experience. I'm going to make connections with the coaches. And if I make it, I make it. If I don't, I don't. So that was kind of, it was a good experience looking back on it.
Yeah. Yeah. I know there's a kid who went to my high school and he's 2 years older than me. And he ended up walking on to Penn State's team, but I think his first year on was as a senior. And I know he was one of their practice guys for like, I want to
Yeah.
say either his sophomore and junior year, maybe just his junior year. But he kind of had to work his way up to that because like he kind of put in those hours with the team and the coaches knew him. So at that point, when a spot opened up his senior year, he ended up being able to take advantage of that. So I think there's kind of multiple ways to get into that. But yeah, like you said, that's the thing when you're around guys who can play at a high level. It's just like, and you can even speak to this, but I like the skill level when you talk about across the different levels of college basketball, everybody's really, really good. Like everybody is, and every team
Yeah.
has a lot of guys who can put the ball in the basket. Like they got guys who can shoot the ball, guys who can handle the ball, guys who can get the ball to the rim. And I think where those differences come in is like when you talk like size, strength, athleticism. Like would you say that's a accurate kind of difference?
Yeah. So I would say from my experience at Moravian, like everybody has your general skills and can score, but looking at my team, Moravian, and then looking at the Penn State team, the main thing obviously size. I mean, Penn State has a couple 6'9" guys, 6'7", so we don't really have anybody above 6'4".
Mm-hmm.
So that's I'd say the main difference. Because you don't find, especially in my league, in the Landmark, you don't really find many like athletic big men.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. Yeah. So that's kind of another thing that you mentioned right there that I also think is something that players that like I know, players that I've worked with, and I think to an extent, everybody kind of has this mentality, at least at some point. But for you, as you know, you're playing with a real, storied high school program, and I know you had the one dude on your team. He's like 7'3", right?
yep,
Uh,
yep.
yeah. So you had some like that, and you're playing. You guys are 6A, right?
Yeah. So we we were 6A. Yep.
Okay, so yeah, you guys are playing like some of the toughest basketball in the state.
Yeah.
And it probably, I mean, 6A over towards Philadelphia, it's probably the toughest place to play. And you're playing against, dudes
Yeah.
every night. And so for you, like your mentality of kind of, oh, do you want or bust? Do you want or bust? Do you want or bust? That led you to Penn State. And then
Yeah.
the cool thing is that last year, actually, when I met you was at a club basketball tournament because you were playing on the club team. So
Yep.
kind of explain that transition from playing club basketball to then deciding, oh, I think I actually want to go play like college basketball.
Yeah. So just to give a little background. So I've always loved like a serious program. Like everyone has a crazy work ethic. All we want to do is win. So transitioning from Plymouth Whitemarsh to then not playing, number one, was very difficult for me because I've always been competitive and like being part of a team. So fast forward to sophomore year, when I didn't make it, I started getting involved with the club team, and I was kind of one of the best players, and it was fun to be playing again, but I was missing that sort of like team and coaching and camaraderie. So yeah, I mean, it was fun to play, but I think if you really love the game and you have that drive, don't be like me and say D1 or bust, because you'll really get a good experience any level. Because people kind of poo-poo like, oh, Division 3, Division 2, but like any level, it's pretty high level competition,
Yeah.
especially if you're around other guys who love the game and are gonna, you'll make great friends, and you'll be studying the game, you'll be still getting better as a player. So I would just say my transition from club to Moravian was that I was just really missing that competitive feel and that kind of realness feel of like a real league. So that's where I said to myself, all right, I got to go play.
Right. Yeah. That's the thing, man. And, from my perspective, whenever I see, players who kind of, again, like we'll talk down on like Division 3 or like, oh, Division One or
Yeah.
when I look back on like so I played it, my AAU team, going into my junior year was, I mean, everybody on that team is playing some sort at some sport at some level of college right now. And
Yep.
there's a dude on that team who, I always say like the top 3 players that I played with or against are all Division One guys. But then number 4 on that list is a D3 player, and he's above a lot of Division One players that I've also played against, like when I was back in high school. So like there are dudes who can really play basketball who are playing at the Division 3 level right now.
Yeah.
I think people need to have a little bit more like perspective on what exactly that is. I know you and I had kind of talked a little bit earlier before we started recording about, kind of how your season went this year, and you kind of had an injury that prevented you from being able to go compete.
Yeah.
But obviously you got to go through. Now I don't know how it was with COVID and all that this year, in terms of like what you guys could do in the summer, and then
Yeah.
how it was like in the fall. So actually, before we even get into it, like what was it like with COVID and all that sort of stuff?
Yeah, so COVID made it really interesting. So when I started reaching out to schools, the main thing that COVID didn't allow me to do was visit and kind of get to know the guys. So when I first picked a school, I didn't really know anybody. So that was the first thing. Then in the summer, instead of having workouts like normal, we would have Zooms and kind of just have team meetings. And then we started practice, I think mid-October.
Mm.
So we actually practiced for like a month, and then our school got shut down and we went home for 2 months.
Yeah.
So practicing for a month, then went home for 2 months. Then we came back, and this is when they had this shortened season. For all the listeners out there, we had, I think it was 8 league games scheduled, and we came back, practiced for a week. Then somebody got COVID, so we had to quarantine for a week. And then we had one more week before we started playing games. So to give you an idea, it was kind of like a chaotic process where like you're practicing, then you get shut down, then you're practicing again. So it was it was great. We were all very grateful that we were able to play because a lot of places weren't. But at the same time, like mentally, it was really draining on a lot of us because one point you're playing, the next moment you're told you have to sit in a room for 10 days. So
Yeah.
it was tough.
Yeah. Yeah. No doubt. That is the thing. I mean, you kind of look at it that way, like, yeah, I mean, at least we got to play, but also it's like, man, you lose out on, I mean, you're talking about the whole summer. Like, you guys don't get to actually be together in the gym, and you're new. You don't get to be in the gym with those guys until October, which is, that's crazy. Like, that's,
Yeah. I
you
mean,
guys are trying to go out and win a championship.
Yeah, we would be able to get in there and get shots up, but like in September, October, but we get to be on the court with everybody and with the coach until mid-October. So, I mean, every team was in the same boat, so that's kind of the approach that we were trying to take. Like, don't make excuses, because every team was in it. But at the same time, it was definitely difficult. So
Right. So kind of transitioning into training as well. I know that, and at least from my perspective, I know that you really kind of started up with a lot of, your like Danny Cooper basketball about a year ago, probably pretty close to that. And that was kind of right when you also made that was also probably right when you made that decision to go play college basketball. So how have those two things like kind of like intertwined? Like how have they matched, and how has each kind of helped you?
Yeah, so I started doing actually right when COVID hit. I think in early April, I did Instagram live ball handling workouts. And that's kind of the first thing that, I mean, I've been training since high school, but that's kind of the first thing I really started doing as my official Danny Cooper basketball business. So as I was doing that, I was trying to play college. And I think really teaching myself how to be a great trainer comes with watching a ton of film, studying the game all the time. So just that has drastically increased my basketball IQ and just really understanding the game. So, like all the terms in training, all that stuff. So like, it's funny because players will do moves now and like, I'll just like know what the moves are. Whereas like the typical player, like wouldn't kind of say like if a player does like a same foot stop, I'm like, oh, I know what that is. But like a typical player, like isn't thinking that. So I feel like it's almost expanded my like basketball brain in a sense where I'm like thinking as a trainer, but I'm on the court as a player. So it's a unique experience.
Yeah. Yeah. No, it's funny you
So
say that because it like,
yeah,
so I'm not playing competitively, but I'm playing pickup
yeah,
pretty often. Not as much now just because of coaching and all that, but like back in the summer, fall, like I was playing pickup pretty often. And it's funny because like just like you said, basically I'm watching a ton of film, and I'm just like learning stuff from other trainers. So like that's kind of like, so I'm just kind
yeah,
of expanding myself that way. And then I'm also playing a ton. I'm not really doing a ton of like individual skill work myself, but like like now
yeah,
compared to when I was like a senior in high school and like I was, playing competitively and practicing every day, and with all that sort of stuff that comes with it, like I'm significantly better now just because I'm
yeah.
playing all the time
Me
and
too.
like I'm watching so much film, so like I understand the
Yep.
game better too. It's kind of a funny thing how that works. So that, I think that definitely kind of goes hand in hand. Like you as a player, you just understand the game a lot more because you're probably watching a lot more film than anybody else on
Yeah,
your team, anybody else probably in your conference, if you're trying
yeah,
to
and
be great at
yeah.
what you're doing.
And what's interesting about that is like I would highly recommend any young player watching this to start watching film because it almost gets to the point where not to say you don't need to practice it, but it's kind of like you're watching so much film that you can get out on the court and almost do the move and you haven't even done it before. Just because in your mind you've seen it so many times. So I guess that's some sort of learning thing where you kind of pick it up. I've been trying to like dive deep into the psychology of learning and all that stuff. So I'm still getting better at that, but it's crazy. Like I'll watch a move and then go out on the court and I'll be like, how can I do this? I never even practiced it. So that's cool too.
Yeah, absolutely. That's literally like I can use that example like with ball screens. Like I
Yeah.
can go out and play pickup, and like I've been watching just a ton of film on ball screens. Maybe
Yeah.
that's as an example, and then I go out and then it's like some sort of pass that comes off that screen or whatever that like
Yep.
I might not have specifically practiced, but like I'm looking for that now because like I'm
Yep.
coming off. Okay, what do I have right here? And but no, it is that's definitely something that I've noticed for sure. And also to your point, with when it comes to learning, I think that's such a big key. Like, and it's funny as I get more into it, I don't know if you felt this way too, but like I think when I started, like when I really started getting into training, because like kind of like you, I was doing it like back in high school, I was, running my teammates through stuff.
Yep.
And my younger brother was with me all the time too. So like that was kind of my thing. Like I was always like, I was always the guy who's kind of, get that guys to go get shots up or go work out in the summer, all that sort of stuff. And then when I got to like actually my focus is training now, after high school.
Yep.
And the thing is like I felt like then like I knew a lot. And as I keep on going and I keep on learning more, I'm just
Yeah.
like, man, I know less and less and less. Like I have so much more that I have to
Yeah.
learn
I
from.
always feel I'm like, I literally know 1% of what I need to know. But I think that's the really cool part about our industry. Like you can always get better.
Mhm.
Like you can know every basketball skill there is, but now you got to learn the psychology of basketball and how people learn this way, and then you got to learn the strength and conditioning and all. You got to put it all together. So that's what I think is so cool about it, that there's always just room for growth. And yeah, that's what I love about it.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. And I know that you've had kind of a unique experience because you've been able to work with a lot of like high level players. I know you've got to work with some NBA guys
yeah,
over the summer. And, I know for you, I'm sure that kind of expands the way that you can view things. You get to look at guys who are like the absolute best in the world at what they do. You can see how their approach is. And
yeah,
so kind of run me through what that was like, how that experience like came about, and overall kind of what you took away from it.
yeah. So the first thing I'll say is whenever I'm like away or on a trip or something, the first thing I do is I look up basketball trainers in the area and I'll DM them. I'll be like, hey, I'll come rebound, work for you for free, whatever. So I kind of picked that up. Are you familiar with Gary Vee?
Yeah, yeah.
So a big thing he always talks about is kind of just like DM people, go work for free, stuff like that. So that's kind of been like something that I do for the past couple of years. So when I was in Florida, actually over Thanksgiving break, do you know Scoop Jardine from Syracuse?
I think I've seen you put like I think you might have tagged him on Instagram or something like
Yeah.
that. So I'm sure I think I have.
So
Yeah.
he was a great point guard at Syracuse, I think like 7 or 8 years ago. So I had come across his page on Instagram, and he's in Boca Raton, Florida. So I'm like, I'm gonna reach out to Scoop. So I sent him a DM, hey, I'll come rebound, work out, or help you work them out for free. And I didn't even know who he was with. Like I was just reaching out, going to help with basketball. So he's like, yeah, come by the gym. So not to get into too much detail, but I show up the next day and I'm looking in, I'm kind of lost. I'm trying to find the gym, and I look inside and it's Markieff Morris. So I'm like, wow, like this is like obviously never really worked with NBA players before. Like initially you're kind of starstruck, like just to give you my point of view. So you walk in and you're like trying to play it cool. You're like, how you doing? And then I walked in and Scoop was like, yo, you're going to run the workout. And it was both Morris brothers and then a couple other guys. So that was really cool to kind of be thrown in the, like just thrown on the spot, be like, hey, you're running this NBA workout. And I think I did a decent job looking back on it. But also what's really cool for me is like that showed me I have so much to get better at.
Yeah.
Because it's like now you're working out these guys who are worth $70 million, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it's like you can't not know what you're doing, or else they're not gonna, one, respect you, two, listen to you, and three, like obviously you want to have those opportunities again. So it's like I've retraced back in my mind a bunch of times. I'm like, did I do that right? Was I good? So it's just been an eye-opening experience for me to, even though I might never work with them again specifically, it's like the next time I get that experience to work with an NBA player, I want to be like, okay, I'm great. I know what I'm doing. So yeah, to give you the rundown.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that's I actually didn't even know that was the story. I just saw, because the thing is like those two guys, I think they're both Philly guys, right?
Yeah, they are.
So I just assumed that like you somehow had a connection in Philly, and then you like went to like you were down with us. Like, oh, like it's pretty cool. But no, you went down there, and it's like you just have to walk into the gym, and it's like
well, so
Morris
what's
brothers.
interesting, I didn't even know Scoop before, and I think one of the biggest things that we can do in whatever industry you're trying to grow in is just not be afraid. I really learned this a couple of years ago, just not being afraid to reach out to people who are like higher in the industry. Like number one, you have to be willing to work for free. That's my philosophy. You're not gonna like really get anywhere high, I feel like, unless obviously you grind it out yourself for a long period of time. But if you're trying to essentially skip like some steps and you want to really get access to high level people, you have to be willing to grind and work for free. So, I mean, to give you like, that experience was like, it was really cool.
Yeah.
And if I hadn't had the balls to reach out and say, hey, I'll come work for free, and I didn't have the humility to do that, it wouldn't have happened.
Yeah, no, that's a great point. And yeah, that's for sure. I'll have like people who want to get into training who will DM me. And I was like, hey, what should I do? And like, hey, how do I get started? And I'm like, you just got to find players to train. And if that means that you got to work out some guys for free until people starts to, know who you are, then like, that's what you got to do. And like, here's the thing, like to this day, like I'll still work out guys for free just because like that's, first of all, it's experience for me. Like I get to become better. I get to try out new things, all that sort of stuff. But also if you help players get results, then you have other players coming to you saying, hey, can we work? Can we do this? And like, that's how you start to grow. I think the best way to do that is like, everybody wants to be like, oh, should I run Instagram ads or should I do this or do that? It's like, no, you should just go help somebody get results. And then if you're good at what you do, then more people are going to want to work with you. And I think like what you said, you can kind of speed that process up by, were you just like down in Florida on like a vacation?
Yeah, so I was visiting my family and I DM'd, I think, like 7 different trainers that I knew were in like Florida, the Miami area, right? And he was the only one who responded. So that's another thing. Like you might reach out to 10 guys and only one responds.
Yeah.
So that's why a lot of people, I think, get discouraged. They'll, even for jobs like in the corporate world, like you'll interview for a couple jobs and not get it, and then you might give up or you might be discouraged. But I think it's important to just keep going because you never know that next call or person you're reaching out to could be your opportunity.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that's for sure something to take. And I think going back to, your whole process with those with the Morris brothers. And I know there was a couple other dudes there, a couple high school guys, I think, who were who's the one kid from Math, Civics, and Sciences, right? He was there.
Yeah,
I'm forgetting his name.
He's going to Miami.
Yeah. So
His name is
yeah, I know because he played. So my brother's school, they played them in the state championship a couple years ago. And I saw he was down there too. So I was like, oh, that's a bunch of Philly guys down there. And then, kind of what I also wanted to get your perspective on is what you see when it comes to differences in when you're working with those NBA guys and then when you're working with just like a high school guy. Like, what's the difference in the way that they approach things? The way that because I've kind of got my own take on this, but I want to hear from you because I haven't worked with anybody like I haven't worked with an NBA champion. Like I haven't done that. So I want to hear how that is from your perspective.
So I'd say the number one thing is it's very diligent. So like everything has a purpose. I think what a lot of myself included, what a lot of high school and college players will do is they'll be like, all right, I'm going to outwork everybody this summer by getting in the gym 2 to 3 times a day, getting shots up, blah, blah, blah. So I think you actually do a great job of talking about this on your YouTube is players don't really have a purpose and they don't really have like goals. And I know you're familiar with DJ Sackman, so he talks about this a lot, like players really developing habits and setting specific goals. So I think my whole career has been, I just try to get in the gym and I'm a complete gym rat, but I'm there 2-3 times a day and I'm not really that focused. So I think what the NBA guys do is everything they do is, at least for the most part, most of them, they're getting in there and they have a specific goal of, okay, I want to get better at this. It's not, all right, I'm just going to go in and I'm going to work on this random move and hope to get better. It's every day they're on court work, their strength and conditioning work, their eating, everything is planned out. So going into after coming off my injury this year, I'm definitely gonna apply that to my game this summer too.
Yeah.
So I'd say the number one thing is just everything has a purpose. And if it doesn't have a purpose and it's not going to get you better, then they won't do it.
That's such a key right there is your focus when you're going. Like players be like, oh, you know what? I just got to outwork people. And if I spend 5 hours a day working out, then that means I'm gonna be better than everybody. And that's just not how it works at all. It's much more important that the time you spend in the gym is spent like actually doing stuff that's going to translate to a game for you. I think, I've only worked with one guy who's a pro. This was last year. And the like, it's funny to me, like how different his approach was compared to most like the high school, even like the college players that I work with. Like when he's in the gym, it's like it just the way that he talks to himself the whole time was really, really interesting to me because it was like anytime that he'd miss like a shot or two, it was like, come on, pro, you got to hit him. And he was like, that's your job. Like that's what you do to eat, like to feed your family.
It's a little different when money's on the line.
Yeah. So that
family. So
yeah. So like going back to your point on focus, like the focus that those guys have to have, because if you're playing in the NBA, there's 450 spots and you got 450 million basketball players in the world. So like there are so many guys who could come take your spot if you don't, like if you aren't really focused on what you're doing. And I think that goes back to your point too about you kind of stepping in there and being like, oh man, like I gotta make sure that like what I'm doing is gonna help these guys because these guys, again, like that's how they feed their family. That's how they feed their kids. I've got to make sure that I'm facilitating some growth for them right here. Like I want to make sure that I'm helping them when, this is what they do. This is their bread and butter. So, I think, that kind of to your last point, the hard work versus smart work. Where it's like, are you just like out there getting a sweat Because if that's what you want to do, like you can just go run on a treadmill for a couple hours and you also get a sweat. But then it becomes like, are you actually developing? And this is kind of a point that I want to bring up with you, is kind of what your approach is in when it comes to development in the off season, because I think that there's kind of a more all encompassing look when you talk about like actually developing,
Yeah.
instead of just like, oh, going out and just, going to work out. Like when you talk about actually wanting to progress forward, I
Yeah.
think that there's an approach that, and kind of a long-term approach that players should kind of view that with. So what's your kind of approach? And you can even, because I wanted to ask you too about what your personal, like how are you going to approach this offseason from your perspective, trying to get yourself ready for next year as a player?
Yeah. So I'd say my approach to helping other players, the number one thing I look at is film. So if they're a high school player, I'll watch all their film. Yeah. So younger guys don't really have. So if they're a high school guy, I'll dissect their film. I'll make them a film edit, kind of showing them what I see, what we can improve on. And then what I'll do is I'll try to figure out 1 to 3 things that we should work on for the summer. So say that's decision making, finishing, and shooting, right? Because I'm a big fan of I'm a big proponent of depth over width. So I think you should really dive deep into 1 to 3 things instead of just a bunch of random things. And like I said before, I'm guilty of doing this growing up, where I would kind of show up and do a bunch of different things. I used to do 2-ball dribbling for an hour. And not to say 2-ball dribbling is not good, but now looking at it, I rarely have my players do it because I just think there's so many more efficient ways that you can work on ball handling. So just that efficiency, and then picking those 1 to 3 things and specifically catering them to that player and the system that they're going to be in. So that's something I'm still working to improve on, because it's not easy. It's not easy creating a plan for a player and getting them to buy in it. And it's a whole process that I'm still working on. But yeah, that's my main thing that I'm working on for the off season, is really developing specific plans for players and having them be focused the way that I wasn't growing up. So to go to my training this summer, I'm really going to take that same approach and, take a deep dive and say, what are 1 to 3 things I can do better this offseason? So for me specifically in my offense, we do a lot of pick and rolls and DHOs. So that's something I should be working on every day. I'm going to have to bring the ball up. So handling pressure is another thing. And then maybe my defense. So I really shouldn't be working on anything besides pick and rolls, my decision making, and handling pressure, and my defense. Mm-hmm. That's kind of my approach.
Yeah. So you personally, do you work out by yourself, or do you have you work with somebody? Or
I have a couple trainers, but I also do a lot of work on myself. So I think that's also something that's really important for players, is you can't expect to go to a trainer and that's the only work that you're going to do. And I know you touch on this too. A trainer's only going to give you, and he's going to give you a lot of stuff, but you need to then take that, use it on your own, and figure out ways to get better on your own, because that's really where the growth happens, and where you find new skills and find different ways to get better. So yeah, I'd say I mix it up. I have a trainer a couple times a week, and then I work by myself the other days.
Yeah, that's the thing. When I just saw a quote, and I posted it on my story the other day, and basically part of it was the best trainers have the best clients. So you could say, in basketball terms, the best trainers have the best players. So as great of a trainer as anybody might want to think that they are, you're only as good as your players are, really. So you got to have guys who are really about it, and it can't just be a situation where it's oh yeah, I go see my trainer once a week, 2 times a week, and that's what I do. Because if that's what if you expect that to be what takes you to that next level you want to get to, it's just not going to be the case. The players who I work with who are the most successful, I'll work with them, maybe it's even only once or twice a week, but on those other days they're in the gym, they're finding ways to get shots up and do other things. When I'm with them, we can work on some more specific things. And then so I don't have to spend, the whole time working on them shooting. Because I always talk about how I think shooting is the most important skill because it opens up everything else. Like if you can shoot the basketball, the defense is to play you differently. The help is now going to be different when it comes to your guy, and it just opens things up for you and your teammates. So with it being that important of a skill, it can't be something that you're only working on 2 times a week with your trainer. Because first of all, as a trainer, there are other things you can do that are not shooting. Shooting is kind of straightforward.
Yeah.
You can go work on your shot by yourself the other 5 days of the week. And the players who are the most successful are those guys, the guys who are not like, oh, I go to my team, workouts 3 times a week, and then I go to my trainer once a week, and then that's it. Like that shouldn't be your approach to things.
And to add on to your point, if I have a player and he's not I know he's not working out when he's not with me, like I don't even really want any part in him. I want a player who's gonna be like he's with me a couple times a week, but I know he's working and getting better, because then if he's coming to me only once or twice a week, we're kind of at the same spot that he was the week before. So if you're not a player who really loves the game, that's kind of a prerequisite for me anyway to work with you. So I don't really want any part in that anyway.
Yeah. I think kind of adding on to that too, one of the big things that I see with players I work with is it's so important, and this is something that like I'm diving more and more into, is just how important it is to play. Like we can do all the drills, we can do all that sort of stuff, which is great. Like you need to do like that stuff's important, but you also have to make sure that you're actually learning how to play, like being able to just play basketball. Like that in itself is a skill, knowing when to cut, when to relocate, when to make the extra pass, when to do all those sort of things. Like that is something that that's playing. Like we can do ball handling drills, but there's nothing like actually handling the ball against a live defender. And so like my thing is like, listen, we can be working out, even if we're going to work out 3-4 times a week, and even if it's with a group, so we're going to do live stuff in the workout, you've got to make sure that you're going to your team workouts and playing 5-on-5, or you're going to the Y and playing 5-on-5, or you're just calling up some of your teammates playing 3-on-3, like as often as you possibly can, because that's where the transition happens. I'm sure that you probably would share that.
Yeah. So to touch on that, growing up, as I've touched on, I did a lot of on-air drills, right? So I'm in the gym 2-3 times a day and just shots on air. But what I noticed was, like, especially in high school, when it came to game time, it's very hard to translate those skills, because now when you have a defender on you, you're uncomfortable, right? So like you were saying, I was a good high school player, but I think I'm a lot better now because I've played so much more over the last few years. So this past summer, actually, we did some drills, but the majority of my training was 2-on-2 full court twice a day. So we would get in the gym with my trainer and a couple other pros, and literally I'll get my ass busted every day. So like that's for any young guys out there, like, not like, if you could take away anything from how to develop in the off season, I wouldn't really say any drills or any of that stuff. I would say go try to be the worst player and go find a gym where you'll be the worst player. Get destroyed the whole summer. You will get so much better. Like when I'm telling you, like I would lose, like, so we'd go like games to 7, like first 1 to 7 wins. Like we'd go at like 6 a.m. So like imagine waking up at 6 a.m. and you're going to 7-0. Like that shit sucks.
Yeah.
But like what it does is it like puts a drive in your like mind. You're like, I need to get better so that I can beat these guys. So now like I'm working extra on my own at home, and then finally like you're beating them a couple times, and just over a couple months, the improvement of playing against bigger, stronger, and better guys, it's invaluable. So that's the number one thing. I don't know if I'd say I regret, but I wish I had done differently in high school is challenge, because I used to not like to play like you're saying, like live drills and pickup. I used to hate it. And I think the hidden truth of why I hated it is because I would have been uncomfortable and probably failed. So that's a big takeaway from what you said. I think it's so important.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. That was me in high school too. I was the on-air guy. Like there was not a player that I knew in my city that was in the gym, working harder, working more consistently than I was. But then where the difference comes in is like, cool, you have that stuff, but are you also playing? And that was where the disconnect was for me. I think that another point that you just made right there is one that I've made a couple times, and like I think is so important. But there'll be times, even now, where I'll walk into a gym and I'll know that like going in there, there's going to be a lot of really good players, and there's a good chance I'm going to be the worst player in the gym. And that, like, I love that. Like, I love walking into a gym looking around, be like, yeah, man, I'm the worst player in this gym, because that means that I've got to elevate myself. Like, I've got to step myself up right here, because I don't want to be in a situation where I'm on somebody's team and I'm the weak link. Like, maybe I am, but I'm not going to let that be the case. So I have to be better. And that forces me to again have to elevate myself. So like I might be able to go play against guys who are, I'm like I can put together a group of 9 other guys that I can make myself guy number 1 or number 2. Like I can do that if I wanted to, but ultimately if you do that, like you don't learn a lot from that. You can go out there and
really
be the
getting
best
better.
player. Yeah, and like, but if you are in a gym and you're like, listen, I'm gonna seek out opportunities to play against players who are better than me, and you're willing to do that over and over and over again, that's why I say now that I'm significantly better than I was when I was still playing, is because now like I play against guys who are a lot better than me, and it's like, to me, I'm like, cool, like that's a chance for me to get better. I don't care, like I might lose every game, but who cares? Like, is it better to, if we say it this way, kind of an analogy. But if I have a guy like, so let's say that I go play somebody who's worse than me, right? And I beat them, 3, like let's say we play 3 games of 7 and I win every game. So I go 3-0 that day. Is that better than going to play against somebody who's better than me? And, maybe I only win 1 game and they win 2 games. Like if you just go based on like, okay, did I win or did I lose? Well, that's not a good lens to view things through, because you might have got significantly better working against that guy who was better than you, and you might not have won all those games. So I think, like what you said, when you go from, when you're working with guys who are really high level like that, you get a chance to really see where you're at and see, man, I've got so much more to grow and so much more to develop. So I think that's a big key right there.
Yeah, and to add on to that, it really improves your mental toughness. And I was gonna touch on this too, like kind of 3 main things that I think nobody really talks about. Not that nobody talks about, but that a kid going to college doesn't think that he's gonna need. So like from my experience this year, if you're not mentally tough, you're not gonna play. So like mental toughness, what does that mean? So like a coach is being hard on you and he's saying, yo, you got to do this. You didn't know the play. If you're not strong enough to be like, yep, you're right, coach, and then move on, if you talk back and you roll your eyes or you throw your hands up, coaches don't mess with that. Like you're not going to do that. The second thing, as adding on to that, you got to be coachable. So when it's hard to be coachable if you're not mentally tough, right? Because most kids, if they can't take that constructive criticism, they're not going to be coachable. And from firsthand experience, people will be benched if they're not. So that's important. Then I think also playing defense, which adds on to kind of the live play. If you can't play defense, you're also not going to play. So that's like, those 3 things were really eye-opening to me, and kind of adding on to our point of you have to play basketball more. If you're just doing on-air drills, the chances are you're not going to really, unless you're just a naturally good defender, you're not going to build those defensive instincts. So then by the time you get to college, it's going to be a really difficult transition.
Yeah. Yeah. That's going to that defense point right there. That, I think, when you talk about like, again, going back to what we talked about earlier with, trying to walk on to Penn State, and, guys want to play at these high levels. Can you defend anybody at that level? That becomes the question.
It's hard, man.
I know. Those guys are so big and athletic that it's like, you might be able to shoot the basketball lights out. You might be a great ball handler, but then it's like, okay, can you now play defense? And I think that's, guys struggle, making that transition from college to the NBA too. Like you see it all the time, guys who can, put the ball in the basket, but you can't guard anybody. And if you can't play defense, then literally you could watch like if you watch a bunch of teams, they'll go against, like when they go against Miami, I saw Charlotte do this. They'll literally just run guys off of ball screens until they get a switch on the Duncan Robinson, and then they'll just take him one-on-one. Yeah. Like I watched them do that. Like they went to overtime with the Heat. I watched them do like 5 possessions in a row. Just like, let's just switch on until we get Duncan Robinson. And then like it could be LaMelo Ball, Terry Rozier, Gordon Hayward. Literally could be anybody on their team. They'll just keep going handoffs or ball screens until they find the guy that they want to attack. So can you play defense? I think that's the big thing. But yeah, man, I know just doing the amount of coaching that I've done, the amount of training that I've done, like the players who can handle things not going their way, things not always being fair. Like your coach might say something to you, you might think to yourself, like, that's not fair. Like, maybe that guy did that too. But if that's your response to coaching or criticism, if your response is like, oh, I got to find a way to deflect this, then like to me, how is your coach supposed to trust you, right? How is he supposed to trust that you're really in it for the betterment of the team if you are unwilling to be able to take responsibility for things? And
you gotta just nod your head and say yes, coach.
Yeah. Listen, sometimes you just gotta eat it. Sometimes you just gotta eat it. It's not always fun, but at the end of the day, it's just about getting better. And I always say this, but the relationship with your coach is one where if he says something to you, he's saying that in the interest of winning basketball games, right? So in order to win basketball games, if you're one of his players, then you've got to be the best player you can possibly be. So when he's telling you things, typically, if he's a good coach or even if he just wants to win, he's going to tell you things that are going to help you because that's going to help him win games. Yeah. So I think players need to be able to take that through that lens. Say, hey, my coach says this to me. What exactly is he saying? Like, the kind of the cliche saying is don't listen to how he's saying it, listen to what he's saying. So is what your coach is saying to you, is it valid? Like, is there some part of it that I can take and use that to make me better? And I think most of the time the answer to that is yes. And I know you've played for a couple different coaches at a high level at this point. So you've kind of been able to see that as well.
Yeah, it's interesting because, like you said, it's not how they say it, it's what they say it. Like, from my experience, if you want a coach to yell at you and get on you, because if he's not, then that means you're probably not going to play, right? I mean, if your coach is up your ass and he's always on you, like, that means he loves you and he wants you to get better. So if anything, you as a player, you want that kind of not criticism, but constructive criticism, and you always want him to be hard on you. So.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So kind of to close out, do you have anything else that you want to add? I know you kind of gave those 3 tips right there, which are awesome. Do you have anything else that you want to add? Or if not, just let people know, where they can find you, what you've got going on, anything that you want to plug right here.
Yeah, I mean, something I think I want to add is just, if you're going to get involved in playing or training, you got to make sure you love it, because there's a lot of dark days. I mean, you're waking up early mornings, late nights. Like, it's not always fun. There's days where you don't want to you want to go back to sleep. So, I mean, I think the constant drive for me, even when I hit those rough patches, is just that I love this and there's nothing else I'd rather do. Like, I always said growing up, I can't work at a desk. I can't have a regular job. So just what drives me is that it's almost like there's no other option. Like, I have to wake up. I have to do this, because if I don't, I'm not going to be able to play basketball or teach basketball for a living. So I think that's the main thing I would say, is just make sure if you're going to go into this or anything in life, you got to love it. So
It's facts, man. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, man, that's the thing with really training and playing. You see, from a training or from a playing perspective, guys are out there, signing their letters to play college basketball, or they're on the court playing. Guys are posting all their pictures on Instagram, but you don't actually, you have to understand what goes into that too. And you've got to be willing to take the parts that aren't fun with those parts that are. And it's the same thing with training too. Like, you see, even with me, my YouTube's grown, but also there have been so many days, man, where I'm up till 4, 5 o'clock in the morning, just going through like, 9 straight hours of trying to make a video. And like, you have to be willing to understand that there's two sides to the coin. And there's one that people want you to see. People are going to post about it on Instagram. And then there's the other side of it that people don't really talk about or really show you, that you also have to deal with. And I think understanding that, being able to deal with both sides, whether as a player or as a trainer, is such a big thing. And it's like you said, it's a must if you want to actually be successful long term in whatever it is that you choose to do. So, man, I do appreciate you hopping on. Let everybody know where they can find you. All the stuff that you got going. I know you got some stuff going on as well. So just kind of let people know.
Yeah, you can find me. I do my training in the outside of Philadelphia area. So you can find me on Instagram at dcoopbball. And then also you can check out my website, dannycooperbasketball.com. So it's pretty much where I'm at. I'm starting up YouTube. I gotta be more dedicated on that. But so it's tough. Another quick thing I'd say is it's tough if as a player and trainer, like trying to juggle both. So it's like I'm trying to start up my YouTube, but then I got practice, right? So it's that's also something that I'm gonna need to really, time management is something that I need to get better at. So
yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I know you throw schoolwork in there too. So you've got a bunch of stuff that you got to juggle with all that. But yeah, I know that I have some. I've gotten some DMs from guys who are like in the Philadelphia area, like trying to train, and I told them like, oh, I'm in State College, so like it's kind of a drive. But yeah, anybody listening now in the Philadelphia area, get with my guy right here, Danny Cooper Basketball. And of course, I'll tag you and all the stuff that I post about this on Instagram and all that. But like I said, man, appreciate you, giving your time and coming on. And I'm excited to see where you go from here. And kind of continue to watch your journey. But everybody who's tuned in today, thank you for listening. Apple Podcast, Spotify. Make sure you drop a review if you have not before, and then YouTube. Make sure you guys like, subscribe, and give my guy Danny a follow on Instagram as well at dcoopbball. Danny, again, appreciate you being on. I'll talk to you guys later. Peace.